Hey guys, welcome to my tutorial. Today we'll be learning about how to do if statements. They're super simple once you get the grasp of it. First, let's look at the game. It has a few examples of if statements, and then after the game we will look at the code and just quickly examine it and give you a better idea. Alright, let's start. Hi stranger, my name is Virtual Kevin, but you can call me Kev for short. I have been virtually enslaved in here until I teach someone how to use if statements. Hey, wait a minute, I can teach you. Do you want to be taught? Let's say no. Oh, well, that's kind of rude. Well, that's too bad. You need to be taught, and I want to leave this place. An if statement helps you in many ways. Say if you only want a certain event to happen, if only if it meets a certain conditions, that's true. Then you need to use an if statement. We will look at the code later, and this will be made more clear. It could have gone different ways. I could have pressed up or down. Okay, let's change it. Let's go for the baseball field. Oh, that's kind of rude. The criteria that had to be met in the direction when the arrow was asked for. So I had to press up. That's the only way it would have changed to a baseball field. Time the script would be. So if you didn't press in time or met the if statement in time, the background would still be white. Okay, let's change characters. Okay, let's go. Let's press down for animals. So it's going to be structured like a regular if statement. But inside each if statement, we're going to be asked to pick another human or animal. And yeah, it is an if statement inside an if statement. So let's give this a try. Let's go up for human. We want another human. Let's go up for Marion. Oh, that's kind of rude. Yeah, I don't know what his problem is. Um, yeah, for sure. Let's take a look at the code now. It's pretty simple game, but it will give you a good idea on how to do if statements. Alright, so if we take a look at the code right here, we'll go all the way up to the top. So I'll just quickly explain the code. So when this is clicked, that's this thing right here. When that is clicked, it starts running the script. So this is just the background. It's changing the background, the stance of the person. So this is all the dialogue. We really don't need to worry about that. What we do need to worry about is this if statement right here. So in the previous thing, I asked the question, hold up the arrow for yes and hold down arrow for no. So what I did here was I waited 1 second because in this program, you have to be holding up or down before it like functions, I guess you could say. So if you were holding up at that time, it would have said awesome, let's get started. But if you were holding down, it would say somebody's mother didn't raise them right. So notice how when in the example I pressed down, it didn't execute this because because the way to execute is if certain conditions are met. So if this condition is met, the up arrow, then it would have pressed this, but I pressed the down arrow. So that didn't get executed. It went on to the next if statement. So if key down arrow was pressed, which it was, then this thing was executed. Then we just have dialogue here. And then I asked you to hold down for or up for baseball field, down for castle, right for school, and etc. So this time it's the same exact thing as the last if statement, except I just multiplied it. So there are four different if statements, one for every direction the arrow can point. So at first, the code would look at this, it would wait 1 second, and if I was pressing the up arrow, the background would switch to the baseball field, which it did in our case. And then it would execute this thing. And then after this if statement is executed, it skips past all the other if statements and then goes onto this dialog. It doesn't execute each if statement at once. So if this if statement was, if I wasn't pressing the up arrow, the next if statement it would go to is the down arrow, because it always goes up to down. So then if it says if I'm pressing the down arrow, then it would switch to the castle, and then I would switch my stance, and then it would execute this. And then right after it's done this, it would skip these two if statements because it doesn't execute every if statement. And then it would go to this dialog. And the exact same thing for the right arrow and left arrow. So it's pretty basic. It's pretty simple once you get the grasp of it. And then this is just dialogue. I'm just explaining the if statement in the game itself. I'm just switching the costume. Nothing we need to be concerned about. Now, this is the last chunk. So at first it might seem intimidating, but it's really not. I'll go through it. So just like before, I asked hold up for human or down for animal. So if I was holding the up arrow, right? This here, let me. So if I was holding the up arrow, this this thing right here, from here to here, because this is another if statement. See, I can pull it away. This is the if statement right here. Here, let me just pull this a bit farther down. So this is the if statement right here. So if I say if the key is up, then I would say so you want another human, right? And then it would and then I would ask the person press up for Mary and down for Jamal. So it would execute another if statement in the if statement, because you can do that. You can have if statements inside if statements. So if this executes and I said if the up arrow was pressed again, then broadcast Marion. We'll get back to this broadcast later. So then if I broadcast Marion, it would say this and then skip past all of these if statements and go to the next line of text, but I didn't have any line of text or program after that. If I press down after I pressed up, so I pressed up here for a human, but I pressed down next for Jamal, it would skip past Marion and then say this thing broadcast Jamal, and then it would skip to the end. So it wouldn't execute everything at once. So that's the exact same for this next piece. So I had it attached onto here. So first, the code would look, was I initially pressing the up arrow or was I initially pressing the down arrow? If I was initially pressing the down arrow, this would not work, and I would skip all the way down to this. And then this chunk would ask again, press up for bear, down for cat. So then another if statement gets executed in this. So if I was pressing up for arrow, this would get executed, broadcasted, and cat. So that's pretty much what an if statement is. And now if you have any confusion about what broadcasting is, I'll explain. So when you broadcast cat, you it's just like down here when I can go to different characters. You remember earlier when I said about that green flag will only execute when I press this? Like this is when the program starts. So this character, say Marion for example, would only pop up when I receive Marion. So that might seem confusing, but it's pretty straightforward. Here, let me try to. It's pretty straightforward because if we go back to the original text, if I press the up arrow when I wanted a human, say if I wanted a human, and then I pressed up again, it would broadcast Marion. It wouldn't broadcast Jamal, bear, or cat. It would just broadcast Marion and then skip to the very end. So that's practically what an if statement is. If you can meet certain criteria, it'll execute. Other than that, it won't execute. And a rule of thumb is, if you have an if or else statement, so here, let me just make one right now. Okay, so this is an if or else statement. So you can have a certain function in here. So say if it's like if Jamal raise like gets bigger, then execute a function in here. But if he doesn't get any bigger, then you so if the if statement the criteria for the if statement isn't met, it would skip to the else. So the else is pretty much like if the criteria up top isn't met, then just do this. So it won't skip past the whole thing. It would go to the else statement and then do that. So it's much easier to than having six if statements than rather oh wait no, let me rephrase that. It's easier to have an if else statement rather than having six if statements. So it's pretty simple once you get the hang of it. Yeah, thank you for watching my tutorial.